Hi everyone, welcome to a special Codex episode of Gay Let's Play Dragon Age the Veilguard. I essentially just wanted to isolate specific videos of me reading through all of the codexes in, again, in specific videos just so that if it's something that you are interested in, you're of course encouraged to watch them. However, if you're not interested in just sitting here watching me read through all of these codexes word for word, you're welcome to just skip over these videos and move on to the next one. So, without further ado, let's go. We don't have a ton. We have a few scattered. However, the most ones we have is the world of Thetis. So I probably know 90% of what's on here. But especially for the benefit of those of you who, if Dragon Age is something relatively new to you, this might help you a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and read through these as quickly and systematically as I can. The Anderfels. The Anderfels are a land of shocking extremes. It is the most desolate place in the world, for two blights have left great expanses of the steppes so completely devoid of life that corpses cannot even decay there. No insect or grub will ever reach them. It is a land filled with wonders like the Murdain, with its gigantic white statue of Our Lady carved into its face, her hands outstretched and bearing an eternal flame. Yeah, I know about this one. Or Weishaupt Fortress, with its walls of living rock towering over the desolate plains below. The Anders, too, which is not to be confused with the Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Awakening character Anders, but he was named after that region, I believe, are a people of extremes. The Anders, or the people, named after, I guess, the people. The most devout priests and the most deadly soldiers. The poorest nation in the world and the most feared. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genitivi, who you meet in Dragon Age Origins, by the way. Andraste, Bride of the Maker. There was once a tiny fishing village on the waking sea that was set upon by the Tevinter Imperium, which enslaved the villagers to be sold in the market of Midrathos, leaving behind only the old and the infirm. One of the captives was the child Andraste. She was raised in slavery in a foreign land. She escaped, then made the long and treacherous journey back to her homeland alone. She rose from nothing to be the wife of an Almari warlord. Each day she sang to the gods, asking them to help her people who remained slaves in Tevinter. The false gods of the mountains and the winds did not answer her, but the true God did. The Maker spoke. He showed her all the works of his hands, the Fade, the world, and all the creatures therein. He showed her how men had forgotten him, lavishing devotion upon mute idols and demons, and how he had left them to their fate. But her voice had reached him, and so captivated him that he offered her a place at his side, that she might rule all of creation. But Andraste would not forsake her people. She begged the Maker to return, to save his children from the cruelty of the Imperium. Reluctantly, the Maker agreed to give man another chance. Andraste went back to her husband, Mafroth, and told him all that the Maker had revealed to her. Together they rallied the Almari and marched forth against the mage lords of the Imperium, and the Maker was with them. The Maker's sword was creation itself, fire and flood, famine and earthquake. Everywhere they went, Andraste sang to the people of the Maker, and they heard her. The ranks of Andraste's followers grew until they were a vast tide washing over the Imperium, and when Mafroth saw that the people loved Andraste and not him, a worm grew within his heart, gnawing upon it. At last the armies of Andraste and Mafroth stood before the very gates of Minrathos, but Andraste was not with them, for Mafroth had schemed in secret to hand Andraste over to the Tevinter. For this the Archon would give Mafroth all the lands to the south of the waking sea. And so, before all the armies of the Almari and of Tevinter, Andraste was tied to a stake and burned, while her earthly husband turned his armies aside and did nothing, for his heart had been devoured. But as he watched the pyre, the Archon softened. He took pity on Andraste and drew his sword, and granted her the mercy of a quick death. The Maker wept for his beloved, cursed Mapharoth, cursed mankind for their betrayal, and turned once again from creation, taking only Andraste with him, and Our Lady still sits at his side, where she still urges him to take pity on his children. From the Sermons of Justinian II. Antiva. In the rest of the civilized world, it is a common belief that Antiva has no king. I assure you, gentle readers, that this is untrue. The line of kings in Antiva has remained unbroken for 2,500 years. It is simply that nobody pays any attention to them whatsoever. In truth, the nature is ruled by a collection of merchant princes. They are not princes in the literal sense, but heads of banks, trading companies, and vineyards. Their power is conferred strictly by wealth. But Antiva is not primarily renowned for its particular form of government, nor for its admittedly unparalleled wines. Antiva is known for the House of Crows. Since Antivans are well known for being good at everything but fighting, it is more than a little ironic that Antiva possesses the most deadly assassins in the world. Their fame is such that Antiva keeps no standing army. No king is willing to order his troops to assault her borders, and no general is mad enough to lead such an invasion. The attack would likely succeed, but its leaders would not see the day. From In the Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar, by Brother Genetivi. Arlathan, Part 1. Before the ages were named or numbered, our people were glorious and eternal and never changing. Like the great oak tree, they were constant in their tradition, strong in their roots, and ever reaching up for the sky. They felt no need to rush when life was endless. They worshipped their gods for months at a time. Decisions came after decades of debate, and an introduction could last for years. From time to time, our ancestors would drift into centuries-long slumber, but this was not death, for we know they wandered the fade in dreams. In those ages, our people called all the land Elvenon, which in the old language means place of our people. And at the center of the world stood the great city of Arlathan, a place of knowledge and debate, where the best of the ancient elves would go to trade knowledge, greet old friends, and settle disputes that had gone on for millennia. But while our ancestors were caught up in the forever cycle of ages, drifting through life at what we today would consider an intolerable pace, the world outside the lush forests and ancient trees was changing. The humans first arrived from Porvolin to the north, called Shemlin or Quicklings by the ancients. The humans were pitiful creatures whose lives blinked by in an instant. When they first met the elves, the humans were brash and warlike, quick to anger and quicker to fight, which makes a lot of sense considering their shorter lifespans. You know, time is of the essence. Like, they don't get to live as long as elves did at the time, so I think that makes sense. Quick to anger and quicker to fight, with no patience for the unhurried pace of elven diplomacy. But the humans brought worse things than war with them. Our ancestors proved susceptible to human diseases, and for the first time in history, elves died of natural causes. What's more, those elves who spent time bartering and negotiating with humans found themselves aging, tainted by the humans' brash and impatient lives. Many believe that the ancient gods had judged them unworthy of their long lives and cast them down among the quicklings. Our ancestors came to look upon the humans as parasites, which I understand is similar to the way the humans see our people in the cities. The ancient elves immediately moved to close Elvenon off from the humans, for fear that this quickening effect would crumble the civilization. From the fall of Arlathan is told by Gisharel Keeper of the Ralafarin clan of the Dalish elves. Arlathan Part 2. You ask what happened to Arlathan? Sadly, we do not know. Even those of us who keep the ancient lore have no record of what truly happened. What we have are accounts of the days before the fall, and a fable of the whims of the gods. The human world was changing even as the elves slept. Clans and tribes gave way to a powerful empire called Tevinter, which, and for what reason we do not know, moved to conquer Elvenon. When they breached the city of Arlathan, our people, fearful of disease and loss of immortality, chose to flee rather than fight. With magic, demons, and even dragons at their behest, the Tevinter Imperium marched easily through Arlathan, destroying homes and galleries and amphitheaters that had stood for ages. Our people were corralled as slaves, and human contact quickened their veins until every captured elf turned mortal. The elves called to their ancient gods, but there was no answer. As to why the gods didn't answer, our people left only a legend. They say that Fen-Harel, the dread wolf and lord of tricksters, approached the ancient gods of good and evil and proposed a truce. The gods of good would remove themselves to heaven, and the lords of evil would exile themselves to the abyss, neither group ever again to enter the other's lands. But the gods did not know that Fen-Harel had planned to betray them, and by the time they realized the dread wolf's treachery, they were sealed in their respective realms, never again to interact with the mortal world. It is a fable, to be sure, but those elves who travel the beyond claim that Fen-Harel still roams the world of dreams, keeping watch over the gods lest they keep from their prisons. Whatever the case, Arlathan had fallen to the very humans our people had once considered mere pests. It is said that the Tevinter Magisters used their great destructive power to force the very ground to swallow Arlathan whole, destroying aeons of collected knowledge, culture, and art. The whole of Elven lore left only to memory. From Fall of Arlathan, as told by Gisharel, keeper of the Ralafaran clan of the Dalish Elves. Beyond the Veil, Spirits and Demons. It is challenging enough for the casual observer to tell the difference between the Fade and the creatures that live within it, let alone between one type of spirit and another. In truth, there is little that distinguishes them, even for the most astute mages, since spirits are not physical entities and are therefore not restricted to recognizable forms, or even having a form at all. One can never tell for certain what is alive and what is merely part of the scenery. It is therefore advisable for all inexperienced researcher to greet all objects he encounters. Typically, we misuse the term spirit to refer only to the benign, or at least less malevolent creatures of the Fade, but in truth, all the denizens of the realm beyond the veil are spirits. As the Chant of Light notes, everything within the Fade is a mimicry of our world, a poor imitation, for the spirits do not remotely understand what they are copying. It is no surprise that much of the Fade appears like a manuscript, translated from Tevinter into Orlesian and back again by drunken initiates. That's a pretty cool way to explain that. In general, spirits are not complex, or rather, they are not complex as we understand such things. Each one seizes upon a single facet of human experience: rage, hunger, compassion, hope, etc. This one idea becomes their identity. We classify as demons those spirits who identify themselves with darker human emotions and ideas. The most common and weakest form of demon one encounters in the Fade is the Rage Demon. They are much like perpetually boiling kettles, for they exist only to vent hatred, but rarely have an object to hate. Somewhat above these are the Hunger Demons, who do little but eat or attempt to eat everything they encounter. If I became a demon, I'd be the Hunger Demon for sure. I love food. Including other demons, this is rarely successful. Then there are the Sloth Demons. These are the first intelligent creatures one typically finds in the Fade. They are dangerous only on those rare occasions that they can be induced to get up and do harm. Desire Demons are more clever and far more powerful. I want to see some male Desire Demons this time. Will you see only female Desire Demons? Kind of just want to see what the male versions are, to be honest. Desire Demons are more clever and far more powerful, using all forms of bribery to induce mortals into the realm. Wealth, love, vengeance, whatever lies closest to your heart. The most powerful demons yet encountered are the Pride Demons, perhaps because they, among all their kind, most resemble men. Oh snap! From Beyond the Veil, Spirits and Demons by Enchanter Midramel. The Crows and Queen Madrigal. I just want to start singing. This is the family Madrigal. Not that Madrigal. The first crow refused to speak, even when we put hot coals to the soles of his feet and peeled the skin off his face and hands with a paring knife. He opted instead to chew through his own tongue and choke to death on the blood. The second captive repeated what we already knew. Queen Madrigal went on a hunt and did not appear for the evening's festivities. Her body was later found with 4 steel swords through the chest. I asked what he knew about one of the four swords being a replica of Hessarian Swords of Mercy. He had not heard about that, or at least claimed as much. He later died on the rack, smiling slightly. The third crow must have realized he would not leave the dungeon alive. He seemed to hope that by angering Mr. Fior, he would earn himself a quick death. The crow tried her patience with pithy comments while Master Fior was trying to work. At one point, he made a remark about Fior's mother, which I shall not repeat here. I will admit to feeling admiration for his ability to retain a capacity for coherent speech, and even some wit, while under extreme duress. Amid all his useless chatter, this third crow did raise an important point. His guild has a reputation to uphold. They are ruthless, efficient, and discreet. How would they maintain such notoriety if agents routinely revealed the names of employers with something as banal as torture? This gave me pause. I called for a halt to the session. After some thought, I stabbed the man through the heart and set the fourth and fifth crow captives free. It is a confession to be extracted. It will not be done with pain. I recommend we abandon this course of action. A report by Captain Aristide, tasked with investigating the assassination of Queen Madrigal of Antiva. The Dalish Elves. I took the road north from Val Royeaux towards Nevarra with a merchant caravan. A scant 2 days past the Orlesian border, we were beset by bandits. They struck without warning from the cover of the trees, hammering our wagons with arrows, killing most of the caravan guards instantly. The few who survived the arrow storm drew their blades and charged to the trees after our attackers. We heard screams, muffled by the forest, and then nothing more of those men. After a long silence, the bandits appeared. Elves covered in tattoos and dressed in hides. They looted all the supplies and valuables they could carry from the merchants and disappeared back into the trees. These, I was informed later, were the Dalish, the wild elves who lurk in the wilderness on the fringes of settled lands, preying upon travelers and isolated farmers. These wild elves have reverted to the worship of their false gods and are rumored to practice their own form of magic, rejecting all human society. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Centivi. The Deep Roads. There isn't a dwarf alive who remembers the deep roads as they once were. They were the network of tunnels that joined the Taigs together. To be honest, it isn't even right to give them such a simple term as tunnels. They are works of art with centuries of planning demonstrated in the geometry of their walls, with the statues of the paragons that watch over travelers, with the flow of lava that keeps the deep roads lit and warm. The cloud gazers up on the surface talk of the Imperial Highway, built by the Magisters of old, a raised walkway that crossed thousands of miles, something that could have only been built by magic. Perhaps it is comparable to the deep roads, although we dwarves didn't need magic. I suppose it doesn't matter anymore. The Darkspawn rule the deep roads now. When Orzammar sealed off the entrances to the deep roads, abandoning everything that lay out there, we handed over the kingdom that was to those black bees forever. To think that there are Genlocks crawling over Bonammer, oh, there we go, I know that one, now, tearing down our statues and defiling our greatest works. Corruption covers everything we built out there. Every dwarf who goes out and comes back says that it gets worse with each passing year. The foulness spread a little further. And the cloud gazers think the Darkspawn are gone just because they aren't spilling out onto the surface? Huh? One day when Orzammar is gone for good, they'll find out differently. Those Darkspawn won't have gone, and we don't have anywhere else to go but up, and they'll do it. The surface folk will have themselves a blight that will never end. Transcript of conversation with a member of the Dwarven Mining Caste, 890 Blessed. The study of the Fade is as old as humankind, or for so long as men have dreamed. We have walked its twisting paths, sometimes catching a glimpse of the city at its heart, always as close as our own thoughts, but impossibly separated from our world. The Tevinter Imperium once spent vast fortunes of gold and human slaves in an effort to map the terrain of the Fade, an ultimately futile endeavor. Although portions of it belong to powerful spirits, all of the Fade is in constant flux. The Imperium succeeded in finding the disparate and ever-shifting realms of a dozen demon lords, as well as cataloging a few hundred types of spirits, before they were forced to abandon the project. The relationship of dreamers to the Fade is complex. Even when entering the Fade through the use of Lyrium, mortals are not able to control or affect it. The spirits who dwell there, however, can, and as the Chantry teaches us, the great flaw of the spirits is that they have neither imagination nor ambition. They create what they see through their sleeping visitors, building elaborate copies of our cities, people, and events, which, like the reflections in a mirror, ultimately lack context or life of their own. Even the most powerful demons merely plagiarize the worst thoughts and fears of mortals, and build their realm with no other ambition than to taste life. From the Tranquility and the Robe of the Fade in Human Culture by First Enchanter Josephus. Fen-Harel, the Dreadwolf. There is precious little we know about Fen-Harel, for they say he did not care for our people. Elganon and Mithal created the world as we know it. Andruil taught us the ways of the hunter. Selais and June gave us fire and crafting, but Fen-Harel kept to himself and plotted the betrayal of all the gods. And after the destruction of Arlathan, when the gods could no longer hear our prayers, it is said that Fen-Harel spent centuries in a far corner of the earth, giggling madly and hugging himself in glee. The legends say that before the fall of Arlathan, the gods we know and revere fought an endless war with others of their kind. There is not a Haren among us who remembers these others. Only in dreams do we hear whispered the names of Geldoran and Darnthal and Anaris, for they are the forgotten ones, the gods of terror and malice, spite and pestilence. In ancient times, only Fen-Harel could walk without fear among both our gods and the forgotten ones. And although he is kin to the gods of the people, the forgotten ones knew of his cunning ways and saw him as one of their own. And that is how Fen-Harel tricked them. Our gods saw him as a brother, and they trusted him when he said that they must keep to the heavens while he arranged a truce. And the forgotten ones trusted him as also when he said he would arrange for the defeat of our gods. If only the forgotten ones would return to the abyss for a time. They trusted Fen-Harel, and they were all of them betrayed. And Fen-Harel sealed them away so they could never again walk among the people. From the tale of Fen-Harel's triumph is told by Gisharel, keeper of the Ralifaran clan of the Dalish elves. Ferelden culture. Oh, I miss Ferelden. Even if it stinks of dog, it's okay. Smells of Mabari. The Fereldans are a puzzle. As a people, they are one bad day away from reverting to barbarism. They repelled invasions from Tevinter during the height of the Imperium with nothing but dogs and their own obstinate disposition. They are the coarse, willful, dirty, disorganized people who somehow gave rise to our prophet, ushered in an era of enlightenment, and toppled the greatest empire in history. There are a few things you can assume safely in dealing with these people. First, they value loyalty above all things, beyond wealth, beyond power, beyond reason. Second, although they have nothing in their entire country which you are likely to think at all remarkable, they are extremely proud of their accomplishments. Third, if you insult their dogs, they are likely to declare war. That is a true story. And finally, the surest sign that you have underestimated the Fereldans is that you think you have come to understand them. Empress Celine I of Orlais, in a letter to her newly appointed ambassador to Denerim. Interesting. To Denerim. The Grey Wardens. The Blight had ravaged the land for months. The armies of the great kings amassed for one last stand. As the sun burst through the clouds that boiled and churned in the dark sky, it illuminated a vast seething horde of darkspawn, with the archdemon at its head. It was then, when courage seemed to fail and all lost to death and despair, that the Grey Wardens came. They arrived in the beating of wings like mighty war drums and stood before the armies of men. The Grey Wardens, grim and fearless, marched forth, ever between men and the encroaching darkspawn. They formed a shield of their own bodies and held that line until the archdemon was dead and the last darkspawn lay trampled in the dirt. Then, demanding neither reward nor recognition for their sacrifice, the Grey Wardens departed. When the clouds rolled back and the sun shone full upon the blighted ground, the great kings knew that they had lost no men and that none of their blood had been spilled. This is a tale about no battle the Grey Wardens have fought, and yet about all of them. They have always defended us from the Darkspawn, taking losses so we do not have to. I remember this excerpt. I remember reading this in a codex before. Adaptation of a Grey Warden legend. The tale outlined above is widely told, although subject to regional variations. Free marchers might substitute great kings for titles bestowed in their given city-states. In Ferelden, the implied army of wardens is sometimes replaced with two, representative of the national heroes who fought and defeated the archdemon at Denerim during the Fifth Blight. No nostalgia. The beating of wings is a reference to the griffins the wardens are said to have ridden into battle. Although griffins went extinct long before the recent Blight, they still appear in numerous stories, sometimes serving as a metaphor for the wardens' unrestrained courage, but also employed to please an eager audience. From Tales of the Wardens by Sister Manon. Majestic Bees. I remember the second last one. I wouldn't get closer than 60 feet, double the wingspan. That left you time to move. The beast was too weak to do much. Still, seemed respectful to keep the distance and leave its end to animal and trainer. She starved out, not the way they should go, and not the way I was used to seeing them. Oh, they were majestic bees, and they knew it. Ask any warden dumped arse over ears for not picking nits. See, trainer and beast had a kinship, and both knew what they wanted. For Griffin, that bond meant grooming. Couldn't fault them. They needed what they needed. I mean, what's fair trade for saddling a warden commander, full plate, lightning storm, sheer dive straight through the archdemon's wing? Legendary, you can't argue. But back on the ground, they knew they were owed. And you couldn't shortcut and douse them. They had all the majesty of a paddling rat if you waterlogged the feathers. No, it was a grueling task of preening 30 bloody feet of wing. And you'd better remember, or maybe the thing got pee next flight and cut an oak too close. Still, you will still close. Give you a love tap so hard your next helm dented. Still, everything in balance, every talon tipped. There was nothing that compared. You could reach down from the sky and cradle Thetis in your hand. Anyway, yes, I remember the second last one. After she dropped, the robes took some crosscuts, because they do things like that. And then we burned it. And then I got drunk. I do not remember the very last, and you can't make me. Comments of an unnamed Grey Warden excerpted from Weishaupt records on the extinction of a treasured species, liberated for public consideration by Lyrium, a bard. I remember Lyrium, a bard. The Imperial Chantry. There are those who would tell you that the Chantry is the same everywhere as it is here, that the divine of Val Royeaux reigns supreme in the eyes of the Maker, and that this fact is unquestioned through Thetis. Do not believe it. The Maker's second commandment, magic must serve man, not rule them, never held the same meaning within the ancient Tevinter Imperium as it did elsewhere. The Chantry there interpreted the rule as meaning that mages should never control the minds of other men, and that otherwise their magic should benefit the rulers of men as much as possible. When the clerics of Tevinter altered the Chant of Light to reflect this interpretation of the commandment, the divine in Val Royeaux ordered the clerics to revert to the original chant. They refused, claiming corruption within Val Royeaux, an argument that grew until, in 387 Towers, the Chantry in Tevinter elected its own legitimate and uncorrupted divine Valhale, who was not only male, but also happened to be one of the most prominent members of the Tevinter Circle of the Magi. This black divine was reviled outside Tevinter, his existence an offense to the Chantry in Val Royeaux. After 4 exalted marches to dislodge these rebels, all that the Chantry in Val Royeaux accomplished was to cement the separation. While most aspects of the Imperial Chantry's teachings are the same, prohibitions against magic have been weakened, and male priests have become more prevalent. The Circle of the Magi today rules Tevinter directly, ever since Archon Nomarin was elected in 734, stormed directly from the ranks of the enchanters, to great applause from the public. He dispensed with the old rules forbidding mages from taking part in politics, and within an age, the true rulers within the previous imperial houses, the mages took their places openly within the government. The Imperial Divine is now always drawn from the ranks of the first enchanters, and operates as Divine and Grand Enchanter both. This is utter hearsay to any member of the Chantry outside of Tevinter. A return to the days of the Magisters, which brought the blights down upon us. But it exists, and even though we have left the Tevinter Imperium to the mercies of the dread Qunari, still they have endured. Further confrontation between the Black Divine and our so-called White Divine is inevitable. From Edicts of the Black Divine by Father David of Carinus, 811 blessed. I find the Chantry and the White Divine versus the Black Divine really fascinating because I was raised Catholic, and as of right now, you can only become a priest if you are male. We only have male priests. So I find it really interesting and fascinating that traditionally, in at least the Chantry, in the classical sense, through Val Royeaux, priests have to be women, or traditionally have always been women, which makes perfect sense because their quote-unquote Messiah was Andraste, who was a woman, versus in real life, our quote-unquote Messiah was Jesus, who was a man. So that makes a lot of sense. And I'm hoping that we will meet the quote-unquote Black Divine in this game, because we've already met the White one. So I think that would be really fascinating just to learn more about Tevinter and how their Chantry religion continues to differ from the ones we know from, say, Ferelden. Lyrium. Lyrium is the king of metals. Beneath our feet it sings. When properly refined, it is smooth, slightly iridescent, silvery liquid. In the hands of the dwarven smith cast, it is mixed with steel to produce indestructible armor and blades that hold an edge for centuries. In the hands of the shaperet, it becomes a repository for living memories. Oh, I remember that. And some scholars maintain this as evidence that Lyrium is itself alive. It finds its most lucrative its application in the hands of the Formari, who use it in conjunction with baser metals like gold, silverite, viridium, or even iron to produce enhancements. Though mages, of course, consume it in diluted form to bolster their abilities, this is not recommended. Overindulgence in lyrium can have disastrous consequences, particularly in more concentrated amounts. It is not advisable, for instance, that any reader handle raw lyrium, which in many cases can kill on contact. An excerpt from an alchemical primer of Metallurgy, Volume 1, by Lord Cerestis of Marnespel. The Magisterium. There is a mistaken impression outside the Tevinter Imperium that a magister is simply a mage, and the mere act of being a mage is all that is required to be among the ruling class. A misperception aided, no doubt, by some Tevinter mages claiming the title outside their homeland to take advantage of its reputation. In truth, being a magister requires one hold a seat in the Magisterium, the upper house of the Imperial Senate. This is the body that makes laws and which chooses the new archon if there is no approved heir. The Senate's lower house, the Publicanium, which, is that where Dorian's family is? I don't remember if Dorian was in the Magisterium or the or in the Publicanium. But I'm sure that'll be reminded to me later. The Senate's lower house, the Publicanium, consists of elected officials, but it has no true power and is considered a bureaucratic body. So maybe his father was in the Magisterium? It's been so many years, y'all. Magisters, meanwhile, come from the ranks of the Circle of Magi and the Imperial Chantry, but most hold their seats by virtue of an archon having granted it to their family long ago. It is not technically required for a magister to be a mage. That I did not know. Indeed, after the transfiguration that saw the old gods abandoned and Andrastianism embraced, most were not. That is interesting. I don't think I knew that. Since the Tower's age, however, non-mages in the Magisterium have slowly been weeded out. A true magister is thus a figure of real power in Tevinter. All other mages serve at their pleasure, and any mage not of proper lineage has no influence outside of that which personal wealth and talent provide. From the Ancient North by Sister Petrine, Chantry Scholar. The Maker. There was no word for heaven or for earth, for sea or sky. All that existed was silence. Then the voice of the Maker rang out, the first word, and his word became all that might be. Dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities, and from it made his firstborn. And he said to them, "In my image I forge you. To you I give dominion over all that exists. By your will may all things be done." Then, in the center of heaven, he called forth a city with towers of gold, streets with music for cobblestones, and banners which flew without wind. There he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. The children of the Maker gathered before his golden throne, and sang hymns of praise unending. But their songs were the songs of the cobblestones. They shone with the golden light, reflected from the Maker's throne. They held forth the banners that flew on their own. And the voice of the Maker shook the fade, saying, "In my image I have wrought my firstborn. You have been given dominion over all that exists. By your will all things are done. Yet you do nothing. The realm I have given you is formless, ever changing." And he knew he had wrought amiss. So the Maker turned from his firstborn, and took from the fade a measure of its living flesh, and placed it apart from the spirits, and spoke to it, saying, "Here I decree opposition in all things. For earth, sky. For winter, summer. For darkness, light. By my will alone is balance sundered, and the world given new life." And no longer was it formless, ever-changing, but held fast, immutable, with words for heaven and for earth, sea and sky. At last did the Maker from the living world make men, immutable as the substance of the earth, with souls made of dream and idea, hope and fear, endless possibilities. Then the Maker said, "To you, my second-born, I grant this gift. In your heart shall burn an unquenchable flame, all-consuming and never satisfied. From the fade I crafted you, and to the fade you shall return each night in dreams, that you may always remember me." And then the Maker sealed the gates of the golden city, and there he dwelled, waiting to see the wonders his children would create. Theronides 5:1-8. I like that passage a lot. It's very hopeful. Here we go. Nevarra. My homeland, my alma mater. The fourth time I attempted to cross the border into Nevarra from Orlais, and was turned back by chevaliers, I decided to take the more roundabout path, a ship back to Ferelden, and then another to Nevarra. The outcome was more than worth the trouble. The whole country is filled with artistry, from the statues of heroes that litter the streets in even the meanest village to the glittering golden College of Magi in Cumberland. I want to see this so badly in this game. Perhaps nowhere is more astonishing than the vast necropolis outside Nevarra city. Unlike most other followers of Andraste, the Nevarrans do not burn their dead. Yeah, they don't. Most people don't bury their dead, they burn their dead. Instead, they carefully preserve the bodies and seal them in elaborate tombs. Some of the wealthiest Nevarrans begin construction of their own tombs while quite young, and these become incredible palaces, complete with gardens, bathhouses, and ballrooms, utterly silent, kept only for the dead. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Genitivi. This is the kind of stuff that I'm really excited about for my Mornwatch Rook. The Orlesian Empire. There are many lords and ladies in Val Royeaux, and I mean this literally. Once, the system of noble titles in Orlais was labyrinthine. There were barons and baroness and baronets and sir-barons and a horde of others, each with its own origins and its own nuances of comparison. The Orlesian aristocracy is ancient and much given to competition. All the nobility play the grand game, as it is known, whether they wish to or not. It is a game of reputation and patronage, where moves are made with rumors and scandal is the chief weapon. No gentle game, this. More blood has been drawn as a result of the grand game than any war the Orlesians have fought. Of this I am assured by almost every gentleman here. As far as titles went, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. No. Everything changed with the coming of Emperor Drakon, which sounds very Fire Nation to me anyway, who established the Orlesian Empire as it exists now. So I guess what I would probably say is Orzammar is the Earth region, the Earth Nation. Orlais is the Fire Nation. Would Ferelden be the Air Nation? That doesn't really fit. And the Water Nation would be... I don't know. Anyway, this entire like parallel analogy has failed. So I will move on. There is no more venerated figure in Orlais, in Val Royeaux. The statue of Drakon stands as tall as the statue of Andraste. Drakon determined that the Grand Game was tearing Orlais apart, so he abolished all titles besides his own, and Lord and Lady. I am told with some twittering amusement that this action did not end the Grand Game as Drakon had intended. Now the lords and ladies collected unofficial titles rather than official ones, such as the Exalted Patron of Tassus Clay or Uncle to the Champion of Trems. It is a headache to remember such titles, and one winces to think of the poor doormen at the balls who must rattle them off as each guest enters the room. The aristocracy is different from Ferelden in other ways as well. The Orlesians' right to rule stems directly from the Maker. There exists neither the concept of rule by merit nor the slightest notion of rebellion. If one is not noble, one aspires to be, or at least aspires to be in the good graces of a noble, and is ever watching for a way to enter the patronage of those better placed in the Grand Game. And then there are the masks, and the cosmetics. I have not seen so much paint since the kennels at Highever. But that is another story. From Beyond the Frostbacks by Ban Tarek of West Hill, 920 Dragon. The Qunari. Here we go, baby. The people of the Qun are, perhaps, the least understood group in Thedas. The Qunari wars were brutal, but so was the Chantry Schism. So was the fall of the Imperium. Some of this misunderstanding is an accident of nature. The race we call Qunari are formidable. Nature has given them fierce horns and strange eyes, and the ignorant look on them and see monsters. Some is an accident language. Few among the Qun's people speak the common tongue, and fewer speak it well. In a culture that strives for mastery, to have only a passable degree of skill is humiliating indeed. And so, they often keep quiet among foreigners, out of shame. But much of it is the result of the culture itself. The Qunari view their whole society as a single creature, a living entity whose health and well-being is the responsibility of all. Each individual is only a tiny part of the whole, a drop of blood in its veins, important not for itself, but for what it is to the whole creature. Because of this, the Qunari most outsiders meet along to the army, which the Qun regards as if it were a physical body. Arms, legs, eyes, and ears, the things a creature needs in order to interact with the world. One cannot get to know a person solely by studying his hand or his foot, and so one cannot truly meet the Qunari until one has visited their cities. That is where their mind and soul dwell. In Saharan and Parvalin, one can truly see the Qunari in their entirety. There, the unification of the Qunari into a single being is most evident. Workers, whom the Qun calls the mind, produce everything the Qunari require. The soul, the priesthood, seeks a greater understanding of the self, the world, and exhorts the body and mind to continually strive for perfection. The body serves as the go-between for the mind, the soul, and the world. Everyone and everything has a place, decided by the Qun, in which they work for the good of the whole. It is a life of certainty, of equality, if not individuality. The equality part is the part that I have the most issue with on the Qun. Because, like, is it really considered equality if... Yeah. But that can be another discussion for later. From the writings of the seer Kant R, 841 Blessed. Rivain. Nowhere in my travels, not in the heart of the Imperium, nor the streets of Orzammar, have I felt so much an outsider as in Rivain. The chant of light never truly reached the ears of these people. The years they spent under the thumb of the Qunari left most of the country zealous followers of the Qun, but resistance to the chant goes deeper than the Qunari War. The Rivaini refuse to be parted from their seers, wise women who are in fact hedge mages, communicating with spirits and actually allowing themselves to become possessed. The seers, I don't know very much about the seers. The chantry prohibition against such magical practices violates millennia of local tradition. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of Chantry Scholar by Brother Chinitivi. Sexuality in Thetis. Here's the good stuff. Woo! Pull up a chair, everyone. What I find most interesting is that despite the lack of open discussion on matters of human sexuality, there is commonality to be found in the subject in all Andrastian lands. Typically, one's sexual habits are considered natural and separate from matters of procreation, and only among the nobility, where procreation involves issues of inheritance and the union of powerful families, is it considered of vital importance. Yet, even there, a noble who has done their duty to the family might be allowed to pursue their own sexual interests without raising eyebrows. The view on indulging lusts with a member of the same gender varies from land to land. This is interesting. I don't think that up to this point have I ever seen a Dragon Age game directly reference same-sex or same-gender romantic relationships. So I'm kind of very, very glad that this got added in. In Orlais, is it considered a quirk of a character and nothing more? In Ferelden, it is a matter of scandal if done indiscreetly, but otherwise nothing noteworthy. In Tevinter, it is considered selfish and deviant behavior among nobles. So here is where this is really cool, because we have had same-gender romances in Dragon Age and Dragon Age 2, and it didn't seem like anyone really batted an eye at it. It seemed like, at least in this universe, in this world, it's far more accepted and far more mainstream than it has historically been, at least in our real world. And people can... I know there have been people who have argued about this and how they can't suspend disbelief to think that in this particular universe there could possibly be a place where people are perfectly cool with same gender or gay relations with each other. I'm kind of beyond that already, obviously. So it was interesting when it did seem like an issue in particular with Dorian Pavis in Dragon Age Inquisition, and this actually explains that and points it out, which I think is very smart, and I'm glad the writers included this just to help with the consistency of the lore. Nowhere is it forbidden, and sex of any kind is only considered worthy of judgment when taken to awful excess or performed in the public eye. Okay. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Chinitivi. While we're on this subject, there is one thing I kind of want to touch on, and I'll try not to dwell on it longer than it needs to. And I meant to mention this in the character creator, but I forgot. There was a lot of backlash when people found out that some of the scarring that was included in your character creator is the transition, trans person type of scarring on their bodies. People really seemed, some very verbal people seemed to have significant issue on this, to the point that they declared, we're not going to play this game anymore, we're boycotting this game, etc., etc. And you do you, boo. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. I just want to challenge people and take in consideration how very hurtful and how very painful that can be for some people. Now, if you don't care about that, you don't care how hurtful your words can be to other people, especially people who I think are completely innocent and have done nothing against you, I think that's a separate problem for yourself. In my humble opinion, I think that's a separate issue and a separate problem if you don't care about the well-being of your fellow person. But I think that it's a lot of people have issues with it because they claim it's suspending disbelief too much. People are wondering, why is this even a thing? How can this be? This takes me out of the immersion of Dragon Age. And if that's how you feel, you can just ignore it. Your character doesn't have to have it. I don't think anyone in the game is going to reveal their scars to you. I don't think so. So, look, if you don't want it to be a thing in this universe, you can just... It doesn't have to be a thing. Trying, completely boycotting or not playing a game simply because of one thing that, at most, you'll probably notice for a second or two, and that will be your total inconvenience. That is the inconvenience that you'll get, is a couple seconds of seeing something and then moving on and not ever having to address it ever again. If that 2 seconds of inconvenience is enough for you to not play a game, I don't know. I think that's personally very excessive. I don't agree with smoking. It's not for me personally, but I'm not gonna boycott a game or not play a game because you can have a character that smokes in it, or I don't know. It just seems like a very specific thing, and for the people who claim that it's because of lore reasons, is because it takes them out of this immersion. Sure, some people, that may be genuinely true, but my suspicion and my theory is the vast majority of people who claim that's the root issue that they have with it, I don't think that actually is. And then they might not even be aware. They might not even be aware that that is not the root issue of what they have with including something like, putting trans scarring onto the character creator. People may argue, why did they waste their time adding this in that would only probably impact a few people? Well, they've been developing this game for how many years? This game it's been almost 10 years since the last game, and they've been developing this game for how many years? If they have time to do it, and it clearly seems to be a requested feature from players. I know this for a fact because I know several people personally who have said that this would be a nice thing to have so that they can see themselves in a video game, which has nothing to do with your personal experience of a game. It shouldn't have anything to do. If there's a little something extra that the developers were able to provide for a subset of people, especially a marginalized people who don't tend to get things like this, as somebody who has not had prior to 1990, who has never had a video game that fully represented gay people in it, I was super grateful that I was finally able to have that with games like BioWare, that came from BioWare. And I'm super grateful and super appreciative that has since improved since then. And it doesn't make me as a player more invalid or less worthy just because I happen to be in the minority. So anyway, that's just my soapbox for a few minutes. I apologize, but I just felt like it needed to be said because, yeah, it just seems very extreme. That way of thinking of not playing or boycotting a game for that reason, 2 seconds of inconvenience for me, that that you can easily ignore. Do you know how much I've had to ignore the I don't call it this whatsoever, but I could easily call it this if I was being spiteful. Do you know how much time I had to endure getting straightness stuffed down my throat, shoved down my throat ever since I was born? How many... I'm telling you, it's more than 2 seconds. I've had more than 2 seconds of quote-unquote inconvenience, which I don't even consider to be inconvenience, but more than 2 seconds of straight shoving down my throat, cisgenderness shoved down my throat since I was born. And I'm not complaining about it that much, nor am I boycotting any games because of that. But that's just me. Surface dwarves. In Orzammar, dwarven society is divided into rigid castes with houses that compete for power and prestige, but all that is discarded when a dwarf abandons the stone for the surface. Under the open sky, everyone is equal, or so the story goes. The truth is that thousands of years of tradition are not so easily tossed aside. Even though surface dwarves are officially stripped of their caste, many maintain a hierarchy among themselves along the old caste lines. Formerly noble houses are accorded more respect than casteless brands who come up in search of opportunity. The poorest noble dwarf on the surface looks upon the rich lower caste dwarves with contempt. Upper-class surface dwarf society is roughly divided into two camps. Kalnas, I actually don't think I've ever heard that term before, who insist on maintaining casted rank, typically those from the noble or merchant caste families. That makes a lot of sense. Typical. I can see a lot of parallelisms of that here within the United States right now, or just in the world in general, who believe in Orzammar's traditions, and ascendants who believe in leaving Orzammar's traditions underground and embracing life in the sunlit world. Maintaining some tie to Orzammar was seen for generations as the only lifeline for surface dwarves. Bringing surface goods to their kin underground and lyrium and metals to the surface was not only the most lucrative means of making a living, but also a sort of sacred duty, as many surface dwarves willingly accepted exile and the loss of their caste to better serve their house or patron. That is interesting. In recent years, many surface dwarves, particularly ascendants, have branched out. They started banks, mercenary companies, and overland trade caravans. They became investors and speculators in purely surface trade. These new industries have proven tremendous sources of wealth, but are looked down upon by their more conservative kin. For less affluent surface dwarves, association with the powerful Kalna can open many doors. They can get credit with dwarven merchants and are offered work opportunities by the powerful dwarven merchant guild more readily, sometimes than more qualified but less connected individuals. From the Dowager's Field Guide to Good Society by Lady Alkion. I'm glad that I'm reading these codexes, because I'm still learning new things about the Dragon Age lore. I think this particular excerpt is one that I've learned the most so far, because a lot of this is new to me, and I don't know if this has been a thing in the previous games. If it has been, I totally missed it. Kalnas and the Ascendants, and that's really cool. Tevinter society. To those outside of the Tevinter Imperium, it is easy to imagine a society filled with mages and elven slaves, and little else. In truth, there are three different Tevinters, each of them a world completely separated from the others. They are the mages, the land's nobility, completely obsessed with competing for supremacy with each other, almost to the exclusion of paying any heed to the nation's enemies, such as the Qunari. The well-bred Altus sneer at the Latins, who in turn sneer at the Praetari. They vie for dominance in the Magisterium, where factions shift and flow on a daily basis and with deadly consequences, requiring every family to put on a veneer of perfect citizenship or face scandal and censure. I'm looking at you, Dorian Pavas. Then there are the so-called Soporati, the sleepers. These are the non-magical citizens who vastly outnumber the mages, yet are beholden to their whims. Many are resentful of this status, plotting in secret, even as they secretly hope their children will possess magical talent and enticing lore, since the talent could conceivably show up in anyone, even a slave. It would be easy to forget that Tevinter possesses a massive class of publicans, the civil servants and leaders of the legionnaires. It has an enormous merchant class, enough teeming poor to drown any other nation in Thedas, and the shadowy thieves called Praesumptor, who are practically treated with respect. And then there are the slaves. One would think they at least see each other as equals, but it is not so. The divide between the freed liberati, those who act as personal servants to magisters, those who work on farms and factories, and the service publicus, who do all the tasks proper citizens will not. Proper citizens will not. It is all but insurmountable. But perhaps in emulation of those who own them, imperial slaves will connive and scheme to try anyhow. Outsiders might see it as futile, but to Tevinter citizens, their nation's social classes are the most mutable and rewarding of merit in all of Thedas. From In Pursuit of Knowledge, The Travels of a Chantry Scholar by Brother Chinativi. The Veil. I detest this notion that the veil is some manner of invisible curtain that separates the world of the living from the world of the spirits. Whether it be called the Fade or the Beyond is a matter of racial politics I refuse to indulge in at the moment. There is no this side and that side when it comes to the veil. One cannot think of it as a physical thing, or a barrier, or even a shimmering wall of holy light. Thank you very much for that image, your perfection. Think of the veil instead as opening one's eyes. Before you opened them, you saw our world as you see it now, static, solid, and changing. Now that they are open, you see our world as the spirits see it, chaotic, ever-changing, a realm where the imagined and the remembered have as much substance as that which is real, more in fact. A spirit sees everything as defined by will and memory, and this is why they are so very lost when they cross the veil. In our world, imagination has no substance. Objects exist independently of how we remember them or what emotions we associate with them. Mages alone possess the power to change the world with their minds, or perhaps this forms the nature of a demon's attraction to them. Who can say? Regardless, the act of passing through the veil is much more about changing one's perception than a physical transition. The veil is an idea. It is the act of transition itself, and it is only the fact that both living beings and spirits find the transition difficult that gives the veil any credence as a physical barrier at all. From a dissertation on the Fade as a physical manifestation by Moreno, senior enchanter of the Minrathos Circle of Magi, 655 steel. Vitar. After extensive study of the Qunari specimens you kindly provided, I've come to the conclusion that the painted markings on their face and body are not, in fact, solely for ceremonial purposes, but provide a practical benefit. Oh, I'm certain there is some cultural significance to the patterns and colors they choose, but the Qunari do nothing without purpose, yes. They call these markings Vitar, which in their tongue means poison armor. It's called this because the markings are magical in nature and actually harden their skin to an iron-like quality without hindering flexibility, and my analysis says the paint consists largely of poison. It's mixed with something else. Blood, perhaps their own, and that neutralizes the poison, but only for one Qunari physiology. Anyone else would perish almost instantly, which reminds me I'll kindly require another body slave. The process activates the magical qualities of the poison, which provides the protective effects, almost in the same manner that Lyrium runes do. How this works and whether it can be used for our purposes will require further study, perhaps some live specimens this time, from a letter written by Nevarra Oreganus, apprentice to Magister Varus, 932 Dragon. That wasn't too far ago, though. Xenon! The Antiquarian. The Antiquarian. I call him the Antiquarian. Is Xenon going to make another appearance in this game? I left the Black Emporium. Yep. Dragon Age 2, baby. I left the Black Emporium empty-handed for two reasons. First, Thaddeus. Is he going to mention Thaddeus? One of my faves from Dragon Age 2. First, most of the items were priced far beyond what I could afford. Second, I spent most of my short time there trying to state my curiosity about its proprietor. I found myself stealing glances at the Antiquarian from behind piles of books, between shelves, and at one point over a basket of mismatched socks. There he sat, petrified, in the center of the Emporium, skin of waxy gray over ancient taut sinew, moaning in a voice so dry and brittle it sounded like the snapping of twigs after a drought. A girl of not more than 12 scurried to and fro to fulfill his numerous requests. Interesting. It was a boy in Dragon Age 2. Another patron noticed my fascination and told me that the girl, most likely an urchin rescued from the streets, was responsible for the needs of the Antiquarian. Feeding, washing, and the like. I don't even want to know about what and the like constitutes as. So impossibly old is he, and so fragile his skin, he can only tolerate the barest whisper of touches from the smallest and most tender of his servants. Only in this way may he come close to his lost youth, said the man. I was surrounded by objects of legend, yet none fascinated me, as did the Antiquarian. From a journal page found in Kirkwald's Darktown, written by an unknown author. Miscellaneous. Have I not read these? I think I have. I don't think I've read these yet. Once, the lighthouse was a place of learning, with tools to study and secret workings of great magic. When Solus rebelled against those who called themselves our gods, the lighthouse became its center of operations. Which tools to study, the best ways to free ourselves from the tyranny of the Venuris. You are safe here, both those of flesh and those of fade. Any who wish to help are welcome. The magic of the lighthouse will provide for your needs, see to your comfort, and help you understand different tongues. For those who have escaped here from different parts of the Empire. For those who escaped here from distant part of the Empire. Should you have any other needs, ask for the slow arrow, and I will help. Felasan. The Dreadwolf's Illuvian. Most of us have only traveled through the Illuvians at the whims of those who called themselves our gods. We know them as mirrors that always go from one to another, a bonded pair linked no matter the distance. Solus has outsmarted the so-called gods. If we use normal Illuvians, they could track us to our lair. Solus has improved upon June's work by creating a mirror whose singing stone can change its tune to take us to any Illuvian and not just its bonded partner. That's pretty cool. Because I remember that was the very specific limitations that the Illuvians have. So I like this now. It's almost like the Flu Network in Harry Potter. Thus, we can travel wherever this rebellion needs us, with no need of pursuit. Travel is safe as a normal Illuvian. If you have questions, ask for the slow arrow, and I will guide you. Felasan. Notes on a caretaker. This note has a smear of paint on one corner. Have they always been here? There are beings in the crossroads unknown even to the wise, though the most ancient ones make any domain their own. Certainly this caretaker belongs here now. I wonder what we look like to them. Need is a scaffold, and the needs of the living ever rise and fall upon it. Hunger, thirst, sleep. Imagine the constant cacophony to one sensitive to such things. Or am I too simple? Wants are fleeting, needs have deeper roots. Perhaps that's why I find this particular spirit's presence both comforting and disconcerting. The prospect that our heart's desire and our truest need could differ or are even at odds is hard to contemplate. A letter dated 6 months ago. Watch Ingelvar. Oh, that's me. Watcher Ingelvar. Not Watch Ingelvar. Watcher Ingelvar. That's me. Thank you for the latest dispatch concerning your venture with Master Varric Tethras. Given that you've spent much of your life in the Grand Necropolis, traveling further north must be a stimulating prospect, and you will be relieved, no doubt, to hear that the crypts have been silent since your departure. Some of the other Watchers continue to censure your methods during the War of the Banners, but I will work to ensure that they reconsider while you're away. Master Tethras claims that this Solus is an elven god bear witnessing. Even if Solus is merely a renegade mage using spirits for dire purposes, that alone is a call for a Watcher to oppose him. Vargoth and I wish you fine luck on your journey. Remember, even outside Nevarra, the dead are ever ready for their supernal aid. Watcher Myrna, Keeper of the Seals. I know of Myrna. And last but not least, the Shadow Dragons. On Tevinter Templars. Ooh, this is what I wanted to know about. How are the Templars in Tevinter different from the Templars that we've come to know throughout all the other games? When one mentions the Templar Order, you no doubt picture the armored members of the Southern Chantry. These Templars are trained to combat uncontrolled magic, blood magic, and abominations with the goal of protecting people, including mages themselves, from the most violent manifestations of magical power. However, they also embody the Southern Chantry's control over mages and enforce many of its strict rules and regulations over magic in general. In addition to combat training, these Templars ingest Lyrium. This mineral, usually used by mages for enchantments and rituals, grants Templars the ability to resist and dispel magic. The fact that it is also addictive, chaining them to the Chantry and resulting in paranoia, obsession, and ultimately dementia, is often swept under the rug. Yes, we've heard all about that dirty little secret. As you may have surmised by my use of Southern Chantry, this is not the case in Tevinter Empire. In Tevinter, we know that magic can only serve if it is allowed to flourish. We do not suppress talent, we nurture it. That is not to say that we ignore the dangers of magic and what it might allow those with violent intent if not combated. As in the South, our Templars are trained to prevent the excesses of blood magic and to subdue demons as well as those inflicted by possession. But our Templars do not take Lyrium. They do not enforce unnecessary regulations. They are not given power over mages, but follow the lead of most of our esteemed Magisterium. They serve the Chantry and the people of Imperium. I must admit I'd rather prefer our way of doing things. From a letter written by Lysthesia Pallas, living in a border town in the Tevinter Imperium, to a cousin Orlais, 915 Dragon. This is interesting. I did not know that the Templars in Tevinter specifically did not take Lyrium. That's interesting. But now that it explains it, I kind of understand why. It makes their job more difficult, I would think, because they wouldn't be able to suppress mages quite as easily. But Tevinter probably doesn't want that at the end of the day. And I think that's it. Thank you very much, everyone. If you decided and chose to watch this whole thing from beginning to end of my codexes, I appreciate you all hanging out. I'll see you all in the next video. Until next time, love yourselves, love each other. Bye-bye.